Alabama basketball coach will be there. I'm sure you have a lot of basketball coaches who are still there. Kirby Smart typically goes over, plays in it. Greg McElroy, who obviously former Alabama quarterback, SEC analyst, and radio host there at Alabama, he plays in it. That's going to factor into our discussion here in a moment. So you've got this kind of relaxed version of Kirby, as close to kind of a vacation mode as we'll ever see him in. And I don't know, he was kind of joking around a little bit yesterday, which I thought was really fun. And I just think it's kind of nice to see him in a relaxed atmosphere, enjoying being a national champion as much as you think he possibly should. So we'll give you some regular football stuff from Kirby yesterday, but also a little bit of a lighter side of Kirby. And I'm going to take my own spin on this in a moment, which is probably maybe not how Kirby Smart would want his words to be used, but it's one of those things that's sort of too fun not to do it, even if it's not quite what Kirby meant. It's still going to be fun for us. I'll play all this for you in a minute, and when I do, it's going to make more sense. But I think you're going to really enjoy that today, and I believe now we're on the other platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. So good morning to all of you, and welcome into a DawgNation Daily presented by Meriwether and Tharp here today. Let me take one more spin around the comment section, and we'll get ready to get started after that. Matt Rukavina says, whenever I hear Pro-Am, I think Bill Murray, obviously. Thinking about Murray for so many years up there at the Great Pebble Beach event. That's one of those things that Murray's made famous. He's played a lot of those, but he's a fixture every year up there for the AT&T in Pebble Beach. And, of course, Jay Shipes, little YouTube on Facebook crime here as they meet in what's supposed to be a demilitarized zone in our DawgNation comment section, says, whenever I hear Matt Rukavina, I think about that Oh, Jay, what a mess he is. William Perry checks in to say, go Dogs. He's certainly having fun here today, and Jay Shipes is there as well. So you got a little Facebook, YouTube battle going on. That's never a bad thing, I don't guess. We talked about linebackers also the other day, and Randy Hall also mentions Jalen Walker. He says, watch him for the future that inside linebacker spot. So professional, hard worker, focused. Yeah, to me, it's an example of something that Georgia does really well right now, which is that once you've established a certain level of recruiting success, all of a sudden now you're not like most programs are, which is desperate for talent. We talked about this briefly the other day, that most programs are just desperate to find enough players who are capable of playing. But once you're not quite so desperate to find that requisite level of talent anymore, all of a sudden now you can be a little bit more selective within the elite category, and you bring in a guy like Jalen Walker, who clearly has the athletic look of a future SEC star at linebacker, but in addition to that, you listen to him speak and you realize, oh, wow, this is also the kind of guy that you can envision being a team captain as well. Truly a team leader, the kind of guy that other players would want to rally around, and that Walker would cause them to potentially be a better version of themselves. That's what you do when you're at the level that Georgia is. I think Nakobe Dean's much the same way. You know, Dean, because of his athleticism, would have been a sought-after linebacker no matter what. But Dean was also the kind of linebacker who wanted to be an engineering major. That's the kind of student that he was, you know, really pursuing excellence in the classroom too. And listen, intelligence is never a bad thing in any field. And bringing that intelligence into football for Dean just made him an even better player. And I think Kirby Smart would say that absolutely. The other Georgia players would. In fact, I think Smart told us that Dean, the only unanimous captain they've ever had, I think that's something along the lines of what he said. But that's kind of the point. That's kind of the mold that Walker is made out of too. An elite athlete, you have to be or you can't play at Georgia, but also an elite athlete who has some of those intangible characteristics that make him even more valuable. Rambo asked, whatever happened to those Jim Harbaugh satellite cams? That was short-lived. Yeah, isn't that kind of amazing that if you want to go back and listen to the earlier versions of this show, I'm talking about, you know, like summer of 2016, before we were on video, when we were just a podcast, we talked a lot about those Jim Harbaugh satellite cams. It was a very hot topic around the sport there at the time. The kind of thing that we wondered what kind of impact that was going to have on UGA's recruiting. Well, as it turns out, not very much. As Rambo says, for the most part, that was all really short-lived. I think that's exactly right. Hemingway also says that he doesn't think that Nolan Smith is getting enough love. You may be right about that, but let me just explain one thing about our conversation this week. So we are building this off the premise that there are three guys in the Georgia defense that are a little bit of a given. Obviously, Jalen Carter in the minds of everyone, that would be the case. I think Keely Ringo has worked his way into that discussion. I believe that Nolan Smith, for the most part, that has there as well. That if you look at early mock drafts for the 2023 draft, and these early mocks are notoriously incorrect, but if you do look at those, Ringo, Nolan, Jalen Carter show up in just about all of them as eventual first-round picks. So what we've been saying is, well, what else besides that? So part of the reason why when we've been talking about the Georgia defense this week, we haven't been talking about Nolan is because Nolan is being treated somewhat as a given, and I believe rightly so. So as we get deeper into the summer, closer to the start of the season, obviously we'll talk a lot more about Nolan. There's a lot of angles you can take on him. But our specific task this week has been trying to identify what else besides that. There are three guys, for the most part, that you would say everyone's aware of. Jalen Carter, pretty clearly. Keely Ringo now, not just because of the interception, but because of what he's kind of grown into and what he's continuing to grow into. And probably Nolan Smith there, too. So that's kind of where that comes from. So we'll do some of that here in a little bit. But off the top, very interesting candid assessment of Kirby Smart yesterday, what happened for Georgia after it lost the SEC championship game as a precursor to winning the national championship. But better than that, just some really, really fun stuff from Kirby, who was relaxed, who was enjoying being a national champion, taking a jab at a guy that he knows well, formerly of Alabama. And although I don't believe this was Smart's intention, we're going to use some of Smart's words to kind of drive home a point that I believe Georgia fans are going to really like. This is going to be really, really fun here off the top. So I think you've picked a great day to be with us. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. And it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I think there are a couple of different versions of Kirby Smart. There's one that we see more frequently. There's one that we see a little bit less. But when we actually get a chance to see it, it's really pretty enjoyable. And this version of Kirby probably comes out this time of year. I'm sure with his family and friends, he puts this on full display a pretty good bit. But for those of us who kind of only know him as the guy we see on our TV screen or the guy we see way down there on the grass on the field when we're in the stadium, he's going to show this to us just a little bit less frequently. In press conferences, when he's around traditional media, print-type folks, Kirby is very careful. I would say careful to not give away too much, careful not to reveal too much about himself. He typically uses, I'd say, those press conference opportunities as a way to speak directly to the team or just kind of put some sort of message that he wants to have out there. These are carefully chosen words, and he's very rarely what I would think of as relaxed. He's very rarely what I would think of as certainly funny. Listen, Kirby ain't trying to be funny in a situation like that in a normal press conference setting. And, one of the examples of this is when he's even been asked to talk about the national championship. Hey, a lot of times over the course of the spring and kind of in the aftermath of winning the national championship, Smart was kind of asked, hey, what does the national championship mean to you? Have you gotten your ring yet? There's a lot of these different kinds of questions. These are sort of what you kind of think of as, I don't know, like life questions, kind of lifestyle type questions. It's Smart, for the most part, just stiff arms every single one of them. Basically every single time someone's brought up national championship, you've been left to wonder, wait, is Smart taking time to enjoy this? Because that's an important part of life. Stopping to celebrate and appreciate. That's the kind of thing that allows you to renew your energy so you can go out and be great again. If you just grind yourself too much, eventually you grind yourself down and you're no longer the best version of yourself that you used to be because you've just worn yourself too thin. So I think, a lot of folks were kind of rightly sometimes wondering, wait, is Smart enjoying this? Is he having a good time? He's at the top of the mountain in college football. Life rarely gets better than this. Is he stopping to take time to appreciate that? Well, I think the good news is, while Smart doesn't necessarily demonstrate that in a normal press conference setting, there is some evidence, including some evidence that came out yesterday, that, oh yeah, you better believe Smart is truly enjoying himself and having a good time. You get him in a relaxed situation, Smart will be more relaxed, and he'll even be, dare I say it, a little bit funny. We'll give you that. But first, let me give you some regular football stuff. So here's what's going on. In Birmingham, they do this every year. There is it used to be called the Senior Tour. It's the former PGA Tour golfers who are now 50 and older. The tour's changed its name, kind of rebranded itself as the PGA Tour Champions, but it's what you maybe commonly would have thought of as the Senior Tour, golfers who are 50 and older. And they have a big event every single year in Birmingham. It's called the Regions Tradition. Regions is a bank, and that's the sponsor. This has been in a couple of different courses there around the years there at in the Birmingham area. But for a long time, it's also had a very popular Pro-Am tournament at the beginning of the week where a lot of, in Alabama, celebrity means college football. A lot of coaches, former players, whatever else, they're on hand. They play in the celebrity tournament, the Pro-Am tournament at the beginning of the week as a lead-in to the region's tradition PGA Tour Champions event that takes place there on the weekend. Kirby's played in this for quite some time. Kirby, I think, enjoys golf. He enjoys being around other coaches. So when you get him in a situation like this, you just get a little bit more relaxed version of Kirby. There was a radio show on hand yesterday, and you've heard me mention this radio show before. It's on WJOX. That's the sports radio station there in Birmingham, hosted by Cole Kubelik, former current SEC network analyst, former Auburn Tiger, and Greg McElroy, the former Alabama quarterback, ESPN SEC analyst. They do this radio show together, and so Smart appeared with them yesterday, and there was some really good stuff in that interview, and some of it was funny. I'm going to get to that here in a moment, but first, just kind of a football thing here. Cole Kubelik, the analyst, asking him, hey, Kirby, how'd you reboot after losing the SEC championship game? How'd you refocus towards the national championship game? What'd you do to get ready for that after you took your first loss of the season against Alabama in December? Here's some regular football stuff from Kirby, and then we'll get to the good stuff after that.
We talked about the cold, hard truths, and the truths were we didn't play well in the red area. We turned the ball over. We were really bad on third down, and those were all things that we felt like we could control. And so we focused on those things, and we knew that we had to get better. We had to step it up. It's the first time that we had really been tested, and our guys responded well to it. We had some guys who felt like they were out of shape and weren't ready to play, and we really focused on that. And I thought that was really big for us to play better, not only in the Michigan game, but also the national championship game.
Don't you love that phrase there? We focused on cold, hard truths. And I love the fact that at the end of that clip there, Smart says, hey, it wasn't just the Alabama game. What we did after losing to Alabama in the SEC championship to come back and dominate Michigan, that's a part of that story there as well. Embracing those cold, hard truths gave us a chance to be the better team in the Orange Bowl. And that punched a ticket to give us a chance at revenge against Alabama. And Smart would say, we took full advantage of that when we got that opportunity. I think it's kind of cool to hear Smart lay that out. And when you did those things, when you overcame adversity, when you came back from a loss to get a win later on, when you knocked off the foe, the nemesis that you've been trying to knock off for such a long time, all of a sudden you get a chance to have a big smile on your face. And all of a sudden when you walk into a celebrity golf tournament where Nick Saban's also playing and other prominent figures around college football are also there, you get a chance to kind of be the bull of the woods a little bit. And I thought we got a little bit of that from Kirby Smart yesterday. I think this is fun. This is funny. Smart doesn't mean anything by any of this. He's just kind of having fun. He's busting chops. He's kind of being a dude. And listen, no matter how successful Smart is, no matter how many millions of dollars that he makes, no matter how dignified he is as the head coach of Georgia, there is still an aspect of Kirby that's just kind of a dude that likes being around other dudes and just kind of, doing the things that, guys do when they're together, kind of, bust on each other and have some fun and laugh. That's why guys like playing golf together. And Kirby is just comfortable in an environment like that. So it kind of leads into Kubelik, the host, asking Kirby about his golf game. In some context here, his co-host Greg McElroy, the former Alabama quarterback, who Kirby obviously knows from his time at being Alabama's defensive coordinator, is not currently doing the radio show because he's already on the golf course. So the next couple of things I'm about to play for you, all of this is context that McElroy is actually not sitting there. He's not on the radio show during the interview right now. But we got some great stuff from Kirby in relation to all of this. If you want to see Kirby enjoying himself, if you want to see Kirby happy about being a national champion, you got that yesterday, including this. Take a listen to this.
McElroy gave you a boast of confidence today, said that you'd probably be the best coach out here playing today.
That's not true. That's not true at all. I've played with most of these coaches, so I know where I stack up. It's not very well in golf. And it's ironic that he's not here, because I'm sure he scheduled his tee time where he wouldn't get to be on the show with me this year, where every other year he gets to sit here and gloat and talk. And
he acted all
this
bad
year
about
he avoided it.
How much do you love that from Kirby? Where's the Alabama quarterback? Normally he's sitting right here, boasting and bragging about what his team did at the end of the season, but now we're on top of the college football world, and the former Alabama quarterback, Greg McElroy, is nowhere to be found. Now, Kirby's joking when he says that. He's not actually mad at Greg McElroy or anything along those lines. But for those folks who've kind of wondered, well, is Kirby enjoying the national championship? Yeah, he is. He's talking a little trash to Greg McElroy, the former Bama guy on the radio right there. So if you want to see Kirby having a good time, that's it. Boy, Greg McElroy, he's always here when the Alabama's on top of the college football world. But where is he when we're on top of the college football world? It's just a joke, but it's kind of nice to hear Kirby Smart joking about that. And then he kind of joked a little bit more because of something else that Pollack said yesterday. And I want you to listen at the very end of this clip for a phrase from Kirby. And I don't think he means anything by this, but we're going to notice it nonetheless. This is one of those things I think some of us have been waiting for Kirby to say. Once again, from WJOX on the radio yesterday. Take a listen to this.
Greg thinks very highly of himself, if you ask him.
It's over. Coach, we work with him every day. We're fully,
we know. I'm glad
know.
he's not here to defend himself.
Now, but here's the other part of that. So when you were walking up, you're like, man, I got to get out there on the range, hit a few balls, kind of get it going. McElroy said, I'm a show and go guy. No range, no putting green, no nothing. He just goes straight up to the first tee and wants to play.
You know, at his age, I used to be the same way. You know, it changes as you age a little bit. Plus, he's got a built-in excuse. You know, he didn't hit balls. So I don't want to use excuses.
Wow.
I'm not an excuse guy. I want to go out there and hit balls and say, you know what, if I don't play well, it's on my talent level. It's not about excuses.
Let him know, Coach.
Excuses.
That is a head coach right there.
That's what I'm talking
You already have predetermined what your competitors' excuses may be.
Oh,
yes, so sir. You're set. You're ready to go.
There's nothing worse than letting somebody make excuses.
Now, first of all, in defense of Greg McElroy and all of this, and once again, it's worth pointing out that Kirby Smart's just joking. He's just having fun with all this. None of this is meant to be taken seriously. But in defense of Greg McElroy, I'm not a practice swing guy either. And I'm not really much of a driving range type guy before a round or even, whenever else. I've kind of determined that practice doesn't really help me on the golf course. So why waste a bunch of time taking a bunch of practice swings when I essentially I'm going to swing it differently when I'm standing over the ball anyway. So the idea that McElroy's not taking a bunch of practice swings or not going to the range for a bucket before he goes on the course, that's actually probably a little closer to what I am as a golfer there as well. I tell people all the time who might play with me that I can't promise I'll play well. In fact, I won't, but I will play fast. I'm not going to hold you up. I'm not going to take a bunch of practice swings or spend 5 minutes reading a putt or anything like that. I like to, kind of keep it moving and have a good time. And so if that's what McElroy is as a golfer, then I guess we're probably a little bit more closely aligned. However, did you catch what Smart said there at the end of that clip with the joking about McElroy using no range time, no bucket of balls before he went out there? He had an early start. I think it was 7:40 local time. Then he went out there. Did you catch what Smart said there at the very end of that clip? It's a joke. It's about Greg McElroy. But, boy, that sentence kind of hangs in the air, doesn't it? Let me give you a couple of seconds here from Kirby at the very end in case you missed it.
There's nothing worse than letting somebody make excuses.
There's nothing worse than listening to somebody make excuses. Now, for a lot of Georgia fans, that can mean a lot of different things. This is a joke from Kirby about a guy that he's legitimately friends with, the former Alabama quarterback Greg McElroy. They spent some time together. But boy, oh boy, for a lot of Georgia fans, this feels like it could have a little bit of a double entendre to it, a little bit of a callback towards some of the things that Nick Saban's been saying this offseason. Now, I honestly don't believe that's what Kirby Smart meant this to be, but listen, this is too juicy not to kind of dig into just a little bit. The idea that Smart kind of gets into his dissatisfaction with excuses, the fact that as a competitor, as a man, he doesn't like the idea of excuses being used. Boy, really, really sharp contrast to some of the things that you've seen coming out of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, since Georgia beat Alabama for the national championship. Honesty compels me to admit. And in fact, it's not just Bama fans who've been saying all of these things and making all kinds of excuses. A lot of this has been led by the head man himself, Nick Saban. So in light of the very stand-up nature of Kirby Smart right there, who says, listen, you got to own your accomplishments, you got to own your failures, no room for excuses. Boy, really compelling contrast with that idea and some of the stuff that we've heard from Nick Saban. And if you've kind of forgotten, let me give you a little side-by-side here as a reminder of just how differently Kirby approaches life, based on what he says there, to maybe the way that Nick Saban kind of approaches life as of late. This is from the last few months.
All right, we lost the national championship game, all right, because basically, we had three corners out, both starters and the best backup.
I'm not an excuse guy.
All right, so we're playing with some guys that didn't have a lot of experience. and it eventually got us in the fourth quarter.
No excuses.
All right, and we had the kind of team where we had a really good quarterback, and we wanted to have skill guys that they couldn't guard. So we had two that were really, really good, Mechie and J-Mo, and they both got hurt.
There's nothing worse than listening to somebody make excuses.
Now listen, I'm going to say this again. That's not what Kirby Smart. That's not the reason why Kirby Smart said that. He's just having fun in a radio interview, and we certainly don't want to, put him on defense after one of the rare, kind of candid, relaxed, conversations he's going to have. But it is sort of too juicy not to notice, and it is a little too tempting not to just kind of pull that out and just kind of realize that, yeah, you know what? When you're on top of the college football world, you can bust chops on the radio. You can talk about not making excuses. And when you're the loser on the other side of that, which Nick Saban is, boy, the language you use after a game like that is very, very different. Funny and hard not to notice from Kirby Smart yesterday and Nick Saban here over the course of the last few months. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp, and glad to have you with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video, starting at 9:45, first and 15, DawgNation.com, and the DawgNation app, 10 a.m. after that, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, of course on the radio at noon, on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and we are available as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com, Apple, Spotify, everything else in between. Just really happy to have you as a part of the program, and really grateful for our friends at Merriweather and Tharp for making it possible here today. They're your source for Georgia divorce. And listen, we have fun talking about what Kirby Smart says and making fun of Nick Saban and kind of stirring the pot with all of that. That's always a fun thing for us to do. But what's not fun for you, and yet for so many of you in an audience the size of ours, just statistically speaking, this is a reality for tens of thousands of you, is that divorce. You've either gone through it, you're going through it right now, or you maybe realize that it's something that you could be going through in the very near future. And I hate that. I wish that wasn't true for you. But if it is, the one thing I can do for you is point you in the right direction. That is to have a strong advocate on your side. Divorce can be complicated, and you probably already know that's one of the reasons why maybe you're dragging your feet on something that you know needs to be done. But the way to make it less complicated, the way to make it easier for you, the way to kind of create a clear path for yourself towards a successful next chapter of your life is by bringing in someone who knows all about it, the intricacies of the law, how those laws specifically impact you, and more importantly, how the law can be leveraged to set yourself up for happiness. So that is what Merriweather and Tharp is all about. They want to listen to your story, and sometimes it's just kind of nice to have someone to tell your story to. That's what Merriweather and Tharp wants. To hear your situation, to learn about your specific circumstances, and to talk about what needs to come next. And the advice they give, the counsel they can provide is based on having been through cases such as yours thousands and thousands of times. So please, find them online. It's theatlantadivorceteam.com. That's the website, theatlantadivorceteam.com. And take that next step to have that free initial consultation with one of their attorneys, and then hire Merriweather and Tharp to do great work for you. That is the thing you need to do if you find yourself in that situation. Merriweather and Tharp bringing DawgNation Daily to us here today. All right, we're going to get Terrence Edwards coming up in just a moment. That's going to be a really fun conversation. Before that, I want to continue the discussion that we've been having the last couple of days as a part of Around the Doghouse here. And, we talked about, I think it was Tuesday's show, about the question that ESPN recently asked a couple of their writers in a piece about who the emerging stars were going to be for Georgia defensively, who those guys were going to be. And like one of the things that we talked about was, the inside linebacker spot and the fact that if you look at the recent track record of Georgia, you see a lot of success. What is it, 6 guys drafted from inside linebacker positions since 2018? That it stands to reason that you would likely see a couple of more future NFL guys emerge for Georgia here this year because of what Glenn Schumann had done with that position group in the past. We talked yesterday about Robert Beal, the terrific outside linebacker who led Georgia in sacks a year ago. That it's one of those things that he almost flies under the radar because he's been at Georgia for such a long time. He has fought for playing time for most of that career. But when Adam Anderson had to step away from football last year, when he's taken off the football team, Beal stepped up and in his place put together a very big statistical season. Had 6.5 sacks, led Georgia in sacks. We said yesterday that If Georgia wants to be a great defense again, it's not just about replacing talent. It's also about replicating the mindset that led to that. The aggressive nature of the Georgia pass rush, to me, was a big part of that story a year ago. Dan Lanning helped contribute to that with his coaching, but bringing back a guy who also statistically contributed to that, really important too, and that's what Robert Beal provides. So, and by the way, we should also point this out there as well, that when we talk about some of these inside linebacker guys, you talk about Robert Beal, what you're basically trying to do here is add them to the list of what you already think is kind of a sure thing for Georgia defensively. And when you look at the guys, if you look at mock drafts right now, when you start seeing preseason All-SEC lists, preseason All-American lists, there are 3 names in the Georgia defense. They're going to pretty much show up in all of those. One of those is going to be Jalen Carter. I believe he's probably the best player in the Georgia team. I believe he's among the very best players in the country. For the most part, even casual fans kind of know who Jalen Carter is. Coming back for a big year, that's kind of a sure thing on the Georgia defense. I'd say that Nolan Smith is that there as well. This is a guy who, when he made a decision to return for his senior season, that announcement was a very big deal, well received by Dog fans as it should have been. And when you see all these preseason lists, Nolan is going to be on most of them. That's kind of a sure thing. Keely Ringo at the cornerback spot, not just because of the national championship ceiling interception against Alabama, but also because of the way that he's kind of growing into a bigger and better role here at UGA. That's another guy that's going to be commonly mocked into the first round, commonly mentioned first team All-SEC cornerback, probably getting a little bit of All-America attention too. So those are the 3 sure things: Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Keely Ringo. But what we've been trying to do as a way of answering ESPN's question is, what do you add to that? And we said probably an inside linebacker or 2. Don't forget about Robert Beal. And oh yeah, what about the defensive secondary? So just for a second here, that's what I want to focus on. Because as I mentioned, in the secondary right now, you know you are likely to get a very high level of play from Keely Ringo. That Ringo, not just because he was the hero of the national championship game, but because of the size, athletic specs that he brings to the table, because of the experience that he's gained, it just seems likely, barring injury, that Ringo is in line for a very good season. Well, what else beyond that? What else in addition to that? And you can talk about Christopher Smith and maybe Dan Jackson at safety, but you look at that other cornerback spot and say, how do you feel that? What's going to happen there? That's where some of the mystery kind of pops up for Georgia here. And this is where I think that Georgia may lean a little bit, while you love having experience in the secondary spot, Georgia may lean a little bit on the influx of very impressive incoming talent to the program. If we go back to February here for a moment, when all the hay was in the barn for the Georgia 2022 recruiting class, Smart kind of talked about that crop of very impressive defensive backs. Some of them more likely to be corners, maybe 1 or 2 more likely to be safeties. But the guys that Georgia just brought in, what they bring to the table, I wanted to bring this back into our conversation as a reminder of what has been said. Where do your emerging stars come from on defense? Maybe one of these guys, maybe an incoming freshman there in that secondary. This is Smart on that group from back in February.
I don't think you actually ever know exactly what you have. You certainly feel great about them, but to tab anybody, the next guy, the first guy to start, I think it's hard. The length and the speed is what sticks out the most. I think, we missed some size in recent years, and we like to have length. We like to have toughness. I like intelligence. I like ball skills. I think a lot of these qualities and traits show up. Your ability to play man-to-man, I think more in college football now than ever before. If you have a liability in coverage, it's easier to find it. It used to be we were all up in a little phone booth, and now we're all out here. So your mistakes or your guys that can't cover, it's almost out of control. Like they spot it on you and they get you. I think this group, number one, has speed. They have man-to-man cover ability. They're going to help us, but there's just not enough of them. And what's interesting is it used to be you couldn't find O linemen and D linemen, and I still think they're hard to find. But you see these schools, top-notch schools, all on the same DBs because there's not enough of them to go around. The premier position right now for a lot of people is to go play wide out, and we got to find some guys that can cover those guys.
So I take a lot of what Kirby says there really seriously. I do think that in terms of the overall performance of the program, looking at potential depth issues in the secondary, that may be one of those things that Georgia has to make sure it addresses as you head towards the start of the season. In fact, that's one of the reasons why you sometimes hear the idea that Georgia might still look in the transfer portal for a safety. It's one of the reasons why people hope that, hey, maybe Tyke Smith, who was a transfer guy a year ago but also injured, maybe he's ready to be a big part of this Georgia defense at that star position in particular for the upcoming season. And maybe that's all true. But let me just kind of give you one slightly different thing to think about here for a moment. You know, the adage that I keep going back to over and over again is that when it comes to predicting breakout players, I am never going to be all that risky putting all my chips down on one name. But I do take comfort in numbers. There is safety in numbers. And said a different way, and you've heard me say this before, that for me, when it comes to talent evaluation, numbers are always more important than names. Any one individual player, even NFL GMs, guys who do this for a living, they're only right about 50% of the time. You and me, we'd be lucky to do that well in terms of pegging who really is going to pop and who maybe falls a little short of that over the course of their career. But you give me a collection of guys and asking maybe one or possibly two from that group to emerge, I'll take a lot more comfort in that, and I'll feel a lot safer about my prediction there on that. So think about this for a moment. You know, Kirby talking about some of those 2022 defensive back signees. Think about 5-star safety Malachi Starks, or 5-star cornerback Dalen Everett, or 5-star cornerback Jaheim Slim Singletary. Julian Humphrey was a 4-star, but still a top 100 recruit. Between those four guys, don't you think it stands to reason that at least one of them, and you may have, this kind of goes back to what we said about linebacker the other day. My guy may be Malachi Starks, your guy may be Dalen Everett, somebody else may say Slim Singletary, somebody else may say Julian Humphrey. You know, like different people may have different opinions about who it is, but between those four, statistically speaking, don't you think you're likely to get a big freshman campaign from at least one of them? And if you take one impact freshman like that and add that to what Georgia kind of already has, doesn't that alleviate a good bit of concern there on that? That from a crop of four very highly rated incoming freshman defensive backs, safety and some corners and everything kind of in between, that there is likely to be somebody from that group has a very big season. I would say that's a safer bet than not. And so when you add that to what you already think you have in Keeley and Nolan and Jalen, when you think about the track record that Georgia has the inside linebacker spot, you know, what, 6 guys drafted since 2018. When you think about other guys kind of waiting the wings from a depth standpoint along the defensive line who just want to show you what they're all about, there's your Stackhouse and, you know, Warren Brinson, folks of that stripe. Here's the thing I kind of conclude, is that Georgia defensively may not be greatest of all time. That's what Georgia was thought to be by some a year ago, at least in the conversation of that. But greatest in the country for this year in the present tense, there's still a very good chance this is the best defense in the country. And it is overwhelmingly likely this is what Kirby Smart defenses have been, which is typically somewhere in that best in the country type conversation. That it is wishful thinking on the part of rival UGA fans that Georgia's going to have some sort of huge, dramatic drop-off defense. They don't have 5 first-round picks on this team anymore, but they may have that many future first-round picks. It's just that the rest of the country doesn't quite know who they are yet. So we'll follow that. That is Around the Doghouse, and it's good to have you on the program today. Before we're done, Nick Saban has responded back to some allegations against him that he may have tampered with a player in the transfer portal. So we'll let you hear what Nick Saban has to say about that. All of that on the way, but for now, Thursdays mean a great chance to talk to Terrence Edwards. Fun to do that right now. Glad to have you with us for the conversation there as well. It's DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, and it's the former Georgia wide receiver right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We'll say hello to Terrence Edwards, who I'm guessing has been very busy in the practice field here over the course of the last few days. Obviously working on that Milton staff, one of the most talented programs in the state, certainly in the Atlanta area. And we've kind of got spring practices across the board here around the state. Has it been fun to be back on the field again, Terrence? You've enjoyed some good weather here as of late. Seeing folks kind of going through the paces there with practice. How's it been to be back on the gridiron again?
You know, for the last 6 years that's been at pace. We didn't have a spring because of the sheer size of the school and the numbers. And so I've kind of missed spring football a little bit, getting back into it. And that's what, you know, I'm used to from being a kid that's from Georgia, had spring practice. watching all the coaches come by, this, what I'm used to, and I'm just happy to be back trying to help these young kids realize, their dreams.
Yeah, it's such an important time for coaches, as you said, because they do want to visit these spring practices. And, listen, there's a handful of recruits we talk about here, but really, the number of guys in the state of Georgia that will earn a chance to play FBS football or just football somewhere, it's obviously a huge number. And for the coaches who are kind of at that, maybe category just below UGA, identifying them when they're freshmen and sophomores and being among the first to give that offer to them, that's the kind of thing that, that really matters. And it's one of those things that these coaches obviously go back on and try to lean into later on to say, hey, I know you're popped now and you got a million offers, but we offered you first. We were there on you first. And that's one of the things I always think is really interesting, Terrence, about this time of year is the way in which you see a lot of these coaches getting out about the state, and some program will come through here and they'll just give a million offers out to everybody all across the state because they want to make sure they're in on the ground floor before some of these very talented players, like some of the ones that play obviously with you there at Milton, they want to make sure they kind of get in on them before everybody else seems to notice.
Most definitely. I think that's the thing now, that a lot of schools are just throwing out offers across the state, just like you said, because now, I was the first to offer you, and that's kind of the trend. I can remember, don't want to sound like the old man on the porch, but that just didn't happen 25 years ago when I was coming out. Schools went out, offered guys that they was going to offer, and all were submittable offers, not just being able to say I offered you, then you got to come to camp to get a committable offer. So it's a lot different in the recruiting game from, when I was coming out to now. These kids have been able to showcase their talents during spring to a lot of coaches coming by with their video cameras. And, these kids that was an unknown now become a known during spring football. So it's a big time for these kids, and I'm enjoying it.
One of the things we've talked about a little bit over the last couple of days is how Georgia replaces so much of what it lost to the first round of the NFL draft. 5 first-round picks off the same defense. That's obviously a lot to replace. And yet when you look at what Georgia has left, there could be in future years that many first-round picks, if not more, currently on this roster, but they've got to grow into a role. Terrence, you understand what talented football is all about. You've done battle with great defenses throughout your football career. What do you think of the task awaiting Georgia to go out and find players to step in place of Devontae White and Trayvon Walker and Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean and Lewis Seen and on you go? What about what awaits Georgia that tries to get that job done?
Well, I just think the biggest thing is it's not the talent gap that we're going to be losing. It's the leadership gap that we're losing. I mean, I think Nakobe Dean is probably one of the best career leaders that Georgia has seen at the linebacker position that we've seen in my time. Definitely. I mean, you heard Kirby say he got almost every vote for team captain. I think it's the leadership aspect that we're gonna need for someone to step up. You got Jalen Carlin. You got Nolan Smith. You got talented guys. Kirby has recruited talented guys. We rotated more in the front 7 than any football team in the country. So the guys that are going to become starters now have played a lot of football. But do we have that true leader in the back end on that defense like Nakobe Dean? I know Nolan is that guy, but can we have other guys bring up? I know we still have Chris Smith coming back. So it's just a leadership aspect that I'm going to be looking forward to more than a talent gap.
How about the idea, and this is something I've talked about, that the other thing I want to see come back again for 2022 is the mindset that allowed Georgia to just be so aggressive last year. I look back at some of the earlier Georgia defense under Kirby Smart, all of which for the most part were very good, but sometimes, Terrence, to me, they were a little conservative, right? It seems like you were trying to protect against the big play so much, and that worked for Georgia. They weren't giving up a ton of points. They weren't giving up a ton of yards, but they also weren't sacking quarterbacks very much either. They weren't making those tackles for loss quite as much. The past year's defense, to me, it wasn't just the fact that it was so talented, although clearly it was. It was the fact that talent got turned loose to get after quarterbacks. They had nearly 50 sacks. I mean, this was a talented team that was allowed to pin its ears back and go out there and be nasty on the field. And when I think about who you put on the field for the upcoming season, there's no doubt, just based on recruiting rankings and just how the guys look in their uniform, they're obviously really talented. But with Dan Lanning no longer here, with Glenn Schumann and Will Muschamp kind of leading the way for that Georgia defense, new pair of coordinators, are they going to let these guys get after it the way that this 2021 team made so famous? To me, that's almost as important as anything else there as well. How do you feel about that?
I think so. I think it's also the makeup of your team. I think this defense and these coaches knew that this defense was special. I just think they understood the strength of the defense, and that is the front seven. And you can make your back end even better by getting pressure on the quarterback. And I think the back end going into this very well documented that the back end was probably the weaker link of the defense. So you get after the quarterback to make your secondary a strength because they don't have to cover very long. Now you have a season now in Ringo. You have Chris Smith, even Jackson back there that's played a lot of football. We got to find another corner now that comes in to replace the Clemson kid. Can't think his name right now.
Kendrick.
Kendrick, that's right, Kendrick. So we have to find other guys in the back end to fill those roles. And I think Tyreek Smith coming back is another guy that I'm looking forward to seeing play. He's going to be a star or he's going to be safety taking singing spot. So he has that versatility in his game to play either or. Will Poole is another guy that's played a lot of football and came on at the end of the season. So do you keep him at star? He rotated a lot at the opposite corner. So we got a lot of young guys that I know that we're very, very high on that's coming in that's going to help. But they're still freshmen. Just like Keelan was a freshman this year, and he kind of still went through his growing pains. But we know that it helps playing than actually watching on the sideline. So we got to put those guys out there. We got to put those very talented linebackers that we got on the field and see what they can do. But it's all about the makeup of the team. Are we going to play conservative because we're young, or we're going to get out and let those guys grow up very fast?
Let me ask you a question about a guy that's been in the news a lot this week, and that's Arch Manning. We talked about you starting spring practice there at Milton. Really, a lot of folks are, because out in Louisiana, Manning starting his final spring practice as a senior quarterback there, and you see some video on the screen, by the way. Our Jeff Santel's been on hand there for that, so you see a little bit of a look at Manning working out there. Terrence, I know you like to watch film, you like to pay attention to guys who have the look of being a future star. How good do you think Arch Manning is? Because the reason why I ask is, listen, for some people, it's a famous last name, which leads them to believe, well, he's the next Manning. He must be great. But there's also the flip side of that for some people, they say, well, maybe he's thought of as great because he has that famous last name, and maybe that's elevating him as a recruit. Sometimes it's hard to know how to evaluate somebody who just has so much fame. Have you seen much of Arch, and how good do you think that he is?
I've watched this film, and the quarterback position is very tricky. I mean, you coming out of high school, we just thought Jacob Eason was the next best thing. He had all the tools, the big arm, the big body, and just for some reason, it didn't click all the way with him. I just think you just never know till they're able to get out there and prove, can they retain information? Can they process information? Yes, he has all the tools. He has the last name. So one thing I do know, he will be prepared. He will be developed. He will understand college football. But understanding and getting out there and knowing the speed of the game, it's a totally different. Do I think he's going to be successful? I think he is. I just think he has the advantage of having a father that played college football, two uncles that definitely one is going to be in the Hall of Fame in Peyton, and Eli has an opportunity to go as well. So he has that. He understands. He has all the tidbits. He has the understanding of how to watch film at an early age. He has the famous last name, but he also has the tools, I think. For me, the one thing that I don't know is, can he move in the pocket right now? Can he get 5 yards when it's 3rd and 3 with his legs? That's what I'm looking for in the quarterback now. I'm just started the days of just having that big, tall quarterback that stands in the pocket that can't move is dead. You have to have a guy now that be able to move the chains with his legs, let alone being able to throw the football downfield. That's how the game is played right now. That is what everyone is looking for. And that's the part of the game that I wonder, can he do? I don't know that yet.
And especially in light of what Kirby Smart kind of said last year, which was, hey, for some people, the decision to go with Stetson Bennett over JT Daniels was unorthodox. Some folks thought Kirby shouldn't do that. But when he was questioned on it over and over, Kirby kind of came back to that idea of mobility, the idea that, you can add that extra dimension with your legs, kind of wondering how much of that Manning can do. Probably seems relevant given the fact that Kirby's kind of praised Stetson Bennett for being able to do that very thing, right?
Right, most definitely. And I honestly think that's the reason Kirby kept Stetson in. Just a lot of times Stetson has that mobility. When the play breaks down, he has the opportunity to get outside the pocket and make plays. And he did that with his legs. I think we all believe JT is the better pure passer, but was there a lot of times where he had been able to get out of those situations and make a positive out of a negative? That we don't know, and we believe Stetson did. So I just think if Arch is able to move the chains with his legs, I think he will have an opportunity to be the quarterback that everyone believes. You know, the legs is not all, and you still have some quarterbacks that be able to stand in the pocket. But the game is changed right now, and the defense has to prepare for a quarterback that's to run. It's easier to sack a quarterback in the pocket than a guy that's be able to move around and find open guys. So I just think if Arch, and I don't know if he has that in his game or not, from the film I think he moves around well in the pocket, and he's a good basketball player. I did see that. So maybe that is another thing, that he will have that mobility and athleticism. I've seen him dunk the basketball. So I like him. I hope we get him. Then we'll be able to really see what he's all about.
Well, I'll just add one more thing to this. In addition to sometimes, running for positive yards, being an actual running quarterback, there's also the kind of thing that like Joe Burrow has proven to be really good at, which is using those legs to keep that play alive just a little bit longer to give yourself a chance to deliver the football the way that it needs to be delivered. There's more to mobility and legs than just positive rushing yards. Sometimes it's also just buying yourself a little bit more time and eluding that one pass rusher that gives you a chance to make the big completion. And sometimes that's what this ends up being about, right?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, if you just can move in the pocket, and you don't have to be, and I tell people, you don't have to be Michael Vick, Lamar Jackson. You don't have to be that, but if you have opportunity to be able to move in the pocket like Stetson was and being able to hit guys downfield because the play has broke down, that is a plus. That is a plus. If it's 3rd and 9 and quarterback's able to get 10 yards with his leg, and that is a plus. So in my quarterback, I like a guy that has the mobility to be able to, for the defense to go into a game plan that their rush lanes have to change. Your rush lanes have to change if you play a mobile quarterback. You have to stay. You can't get upfield against a mobile quarterback now because he's found lanes to get to. You have to mud rush, as we say, just stay there and just hopefully the back end can sustain the coverage long enough that you can get to him. But it just changed the game when you got a quarterback that's able to move around in the pocket.
Hey, very quickly, I've kept you long, and I apologize. One more final thing. There's been a lot of talk lately about, who Georgia's playing this upcoming season. Georgia opens against Oregon, but they are a big favorite there. There's been some chatter about, well, maybe Spencer Rattler in South Carolina could pull an upset over UGA. There's been some talk coming out of Kentucky. They feel like they're ready to play Georgia closer than they've played them the last couple of years. When you look at that, Terrence, whether it be season opener against Oregon or road games against Mike Leach and Mississippi State, and the Gamecocks with Spencer Rattler, and Tennessee coming to Athens. A lot of folks think Tennessee is going to be kind of a top 25 type team this year, better than they've been. Do you see a game right now, or when you start looking at some of that kind of stuff, where do you think the most likely threat maybe to come for Georgia this upcoming season? For a team that's the reigning national champions, is there a potential speed bump maybe on this schedule for this upcoming year?
I mean, it's college football, so I just think, you got to take every opponent and play them like they're your last game, like they're the national championship game. Just looking at the schedule, it's always tough playing an Oregon-type team that you're not very familiar with in a neutral site. So that's going to be a tough game, in my opinion. I think Oregon has done a good job of recruiting, and they got some players. The game that I'm really looking forward to is the Tennessee game. I think Tennessee and Josh Heupel has done a great job. They bring a vertical passing threat that I think is a challenge, and I think they're getting better. So the Tennessee game, and we have them home with big game that I'm looking for. Of course, Florida every year is a game that, you just can't skip. There's been times where we've been a favorite and they beat us. So the Tennessee game is the really game that I'm circling that, I'm looking for to see what our secondary does, what our defense able to do against a vertical passing threat that Tennessee is going to bring.
Terrence, I think that's great stuff, and obviously you're doing a great job working with folks all the time. Remind people how they can get in touch with the Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy and get some of that great training that you've been providing for some folks for so many years. If they want to know more about that, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, you can find me on all social media platforms at Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy. And June 11th, one of my best friends, my brother, Damon Gary and I will be putting on a wide receiver killing at Clark Central High School, June the 11th from 1 to 3. So if anybody in the North Georgia area, please contact Damian Gary or myself to get more information on that.
Well, that's great to hear. Two great former teammates. Obviously, Damian Gary's a guy we also like a lot here, too. So fun to have you guys training together. I know folks will really learn a lot about the game spending time around y'all coming up on June the 11th. So let's make sure folks reach out on that because that sounds like a wonderful experience. Terrence, thanks for letting us know, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
How about Damian Gary, man? That's a fun throwback to a great former Dog, and fun to think about he and Terrence working together with some of these future wide receivers. That is a great thing to think about. We're going to get into our SEC Through here in a moment, kind of go around some of the big news in the SEC. We call it cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. By the way, speaking of Royal Caribbean, man, this is the time that you want to make that plans for your next Royal Caribbean cruise. Some of y'all know I've already been on 2 already this year, but that doesn't mean that I'm not already thinking about when my next one's going to be, whether it be the 3, the 4-night variety going around the Bahamas, going to Perfect Day, Coco Cay, the 7-night variety there as well. Whatever you're talking about here, it's time to do that when it comes to Royal Caribbean. Last night I was actually spending some time looking online at the ship called Wonder of the Seas. This is the largest cruise ship in the world, and it's actually going to be sailing in Port Canaveral coming up here really soon. So I'm really excited about that. I was just on Harmony of the Seas. That's an Oasis class ship. That means that's the very big category that Royal Caribbean has, with Wonder of the Seas even a little bit bigger. It's also got a couple of new restaurants that I haven't tried before, so I was thinking about maybe there's a chance to start thinking about maybe getting a cruise for my family and me all on board the Wonder of the Seas and enjoying the zip line and the great shows. There's the aqua theater in the back of the ship where you see the high dive shows. There are all the great neighborhoods where you can just experience so many different things. I mean, it's so amazing the fun you get to enjoy when you're on board a Royal Caribbean cruise ship, whether it be obviously the kinds of Caribbean destinations, which obviously Royal Caribbean's famous for, but also heading to Alaska a lot this summer, things like that. For some of you, that's been kind of a dream vacation for a long time. A Royal Caribbean cruise ship going through Alaska, that's the kind of experience that you might want to have there as well. Whatever you think the right Royal Caribbean cruise vacation for you would be, the way to get it booked or the way to learn more about it is with our friends at the Cruise and Vacation Authority. They'll help you with all this. Go to tcava.com for a lot more on that. That's tcava.com. That's the website. Or give them a call, 770-952-8300. That's 770-952-8300. All right, SEC Through time here with our friends at Royal Caribbean. Let's talk about some news. A little bit of an accusation from Scott Satterfield, the Louisville coach, about Nick Saban tampering with a player on his roster. You know that Tyler Harrell, the wide receiver, is leaving Louisville to go to Alabama. Satterfield says that Alabama tampered with Harrell to get him there. Nick Saban, also at the Regions Celebrity Pro-Am Golf Tournament yesterday, is denying that, basically saying that he says, we don't tamper with anybody, Saban says. That's not what Satterfield says, but a pretty emphatic denial on the part of Saban. He went on in the discussion to talk more about this thing. I don't know of anybody that tampered with him. He says, I don't really know that anybody's ever tampered with our players. I just think that sometimes when things happen, it makes you wonder. So I'm not making any accusations against anybody that's done anything to our players. I don't have any knowledge of anybody that's done anything with anybody else's players either. So Nick Saban says he's kind of playing dumb about all of this, which is weird to me because it's fairly obvious in certain situations that certain guys were tampered with. I think the response on the part of some people, and I think this is frankly kind of weird, is like, well, what are you going to do? Well, what you're going to do is have some sort of rule and enforce those rules. I mean, listen, I'm not saying that everything has to be just absolutely militant in terms of, whatever else. Different times, different people choose to enforce different rules with, varying levels of severity. But if you don't have any rules, you don't have a sport. And I just find it amazing how many people don't seem to understand that they just seem to want to shrug and kind of, laugh off, any transfer at any point in time, no matter how close it is to the start of the season, happening during the season, whatever else. Some people just seem to have a very high level of comfort with with total anarchy, which I think is bad for college sports in general. Now, in Saban's case here, he says he didn't tamper. I don't know that he did, don't know that he didn't. For him to say that he doesn't have any knowledge that tampering's going on, that's one of those things where, like, how can you have any awareness of this whatsoever, given how obviously ever-present it is in certain situations? I'm thinking about Tyreek Stevenson leaving Georgia to go to Miami. There was a story in the Miami Herald before Stevenson was even in the transfer portal, but the Hurricanes going after Stevenson. Like, that is an example of what I think kind of should be outside the boundaries of what should be normal and accepted when it comes to all this kind of stuff. So that kind of, sort of shrugging, I don't know, from Nick Saban, I don't believe is particularly helpful in the overall conversation around this. As far as the game on the field goes, we are getting closer and closer to the start of the season, and one of the ways you know that's true is because you start seeing some point spreads released. Now, we've had week 1 lines out for a while. The folks over at FanDuel have released even more what you call look-ahead lines for some of their games of the year. For whatever reason, I don't know why this is. They have a very odd collection of games they have lines posted for it. Like, eventually we'll see these from, like, Circa in Las Vegas, and Golden Nuggets always pretty early on some of this kind of stuff. So eventually we'll see more. But for now, the only line involving Georgia that FanDuel has out is the season opener against Oregon, and they've got Georgia as a 16.5-point favorite there on that. I don't think that game has much chance of being any closer than that. But if you want some other SEC-related stuff, interesting to see Florida getting a little love, at least from a point spread standpoint. They're a 2.5-point favorite at home against Utah. Hard for me to like the Gators there in that spot, although Utah is certainly traveling a long way away. So odds makers kind of liking Florida a little bit there. I also thought it was kind of interesting, and for whatever reason, like, there's a lot of Florida games on here, very few, Georgia games, just the one. Florida also a 4-point favorite hosting Kentucky. That game taking place on September the 10th. Isn't that interesting? Based on, first of all, Vince Marrow's got the Kentucky assistant Vince Marrow is going to be very disappointed to hear this, because he's got Kentucky beating Georgia, and yet the odds makers here don't even think they're going to beat Florida when Florida's really pretty terrible. So a little bit of love for the Gators playing at home early during the season. Alabama on the road at Texas on September the 10th. They're a 15-point favorite there. Let's see if there's anything else worth noting here. I think one of the big non-conference games this season is Texas A&M hosting Miami. That's September 17th. If you're interested here, A&M a 9-point favorite, so apparently all the NIL money that the Miami booster John Ruiz has been throwing around, not exactly closing the gap against SEC competition, at least according to the odds makers there on that. Ole Miss is at Georgia Tech on September 17th. They're a 10-point favorite there. Auburn's a 1-point underdog hosting Penn State on September the 17th. Anything else worth mentioning here? Let me just scroll really quickly. Arkansas, 17-point underdog against Alabama on October the 1st. Like I said, there's like a weird collection of games here. For whatever reason, only one of these involving Georgia. So Alabama's a 16-point favorite hosting Texas A&M on October the 8th. Tennessee, 16.5-point underdog against Alabama on October the 15th. The games they chose to set lines for and the ones they didn't don't make a ton of sense to me. But nonetheless, we're starting to see some of that kind of out there here right now. So we'll make that cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. I also want to give a couple of shout-outs here before we get ready to go. First of all, tonight, SEC baseball in Knoxville. Number 1 Tennessee hosts Georgia. This is a pretty big series for Georgia after losing 2 or 3 last week to Vanderbilt. Obviously trying to keep, in line for SEC seeding for the SEC tournament, but also, postseason implications, hosting regional, things like that. And plus, if you follow college baseball at all, and you've heard me talk about this before, I think that this Tennessee team is a little unique in the way in which it's been. It's as hated as any college baseball team that I've seen. In the SEC circles, SEC fans have been hating on Vanderbilt for a long time. They're a little bit of a, what some people think of as an arrogant program. But I think that Tony Vitelli and Tennessee have taken that to a completely different level, and they've been involved in crazy controversy all season long, bumping umps, illegal bats. There was a game against Auburn the other day where the Auburn player hit a home run and threw the bat into the Tennessee dugout. Like, his bat flipped, went all the way into the dugout, benches cleared on that. It's like literally something every single week for Tennessee baseball. They also actually lost a series last week up in Lexington. A little bit of a surprise there, so they probably return home in a little bit of a bad mood. But nonetheless, if you care about college baseball, this is a pretty fun one to watch. I believe it's ESPNU tonight for this, so regular TV, you should be able to see a pretty good bit of TV coverage this weekend for Georgia and Tennessee, including starting tonight on that. Then, I believe tomorrow we may have a special guest, and I believe it may be David Pollack. David's going to be on the show coming up here pretty soon, but part of the reason why is because David's got a big event coming up, he and his foundation, that we've been trying to work hard to make you aware of. We're actually lucky enough to be broadcasting live here coming up 2 Mondays from right now. We've got a couple of really fun live broadcasts coming up. One of these is coming up with the Pollack Family Foundation and David Pollack for the great golf tournament they're going to be doing on Monday, May 23rd. So we're going to be there on hand for that. We'll be broadcasting live there that day. And the reason why we're there is because, A, it's just kind of fun to be in a golf course like this time of year, of course, but also we really believe in the work the Pollack Family Foundation is doing to educate and help when it comes to childhood obesity. You know, health is a big thing to David. David's always been very serious about that, takes nutrition and health and fitness really seriously, and helping kids with that is something that he also takes really seriously there as well. And so that's what the Pollack Family Foundation kind of does. Now, this is also helping raise money for Children's Healthcare of Atlanta there too. They've got a terrific program there as well called Strong for Life. And, you know, of course, any of us who have kids in this area can't help but be a big believer in what Children's Healthcare of Atlanta is doing. And so the Pollack Family Foundation, in addition to their commitment to fighting against childhood obesity, also helping support Children's Healthcare of Atlanta and their Strong for Life program. So my encouragement to you is to get involved here. Learn more about the great stuff that David's doing. It's always just kind of cool to see former dogs who've kind of moved on to the next phase of their life, but stay close to, you know, our UGA community and use the fame they've been given to leverage it for the benefit of everybody else. And that's really something that David's doing here. So I'd love to see you get involved with this. Check out the website. It's PollackFamilyFoundation.com. That's PollackFamilyFoundation.com. You can find out more about the foundation, the stuff they're doing, the way in which they're working in particular in this golf tournament to help Children's Healthcare of Atlanta and their Strong for Life program. I really will hope you'll check that out because I think David's doing great work, and I believe tomorrow we actually may have him on the show to talk a little bit about that. If it's not tomorrow, it's going to be coming up really soon. So that'll be good. We'll do that. But great to see David out there doing great work and looking forward to being with them on Monday, May 23rd for what's going to be a really, really fun golf tournament. All right, so to go back to the top of the program, we kind of had some fun with Alabama's propensity to make excuses, Kirby Smart's rejection of any excuses. Now, Smart was joking when he said that on the golf course, but nonetheless, it draws a pretty sharp contrast from what we're getting from Alabama right now. And in light of that, I got a great tweet yesterday. Folks have had some fun there's a big sign in the Alabama football room that says no excuses, and that just seems like a really ironic thing to have decorating your walls given what Alabama's done here. So in light of that, that's our golden shoe for today. Somebody having a turn with this, changing the no excuses to nothing but excuses, and then superimposing Kirby on there to laugh about all of that. Good stuff by Tim Tatum, who goes by Third and Ringo on Twitter. Tim, congratulations to you. We'll make you a golden shoe winner for today. And good Georgia fans are Gator haters. That means we do a Gator Hater update to remind you it's been 4,872 days since the lousy, stinking Gators have won a national championship. Been 170 days from right now, Georgia's going to beat them again. It'll be Billy Napier's first loss, but simply Kirby's most recent win. That is our Gator Hater countdown. Our buddy Eddie loves that, unofficial mascot of our program. We'll see you tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. And on video. Time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews. Of course, you turn to them for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. It's one of the reasons why we love R.S. Andrews, and we think about them a lot this time of year when it comes to that heat all around us, right? It's hot. It's getting hot. May is here. We're kind of getting out of that, sort of kind of cool temperature type thing. It's a little bit more consistently warm now, which means if your air conditioning unit's not ready, boy, oh boy, it's going to make for some tough nights for you and certainly your family. So do what needs to be done here. Now, somebody may have told you, hey, you got to get a new air conditioning unit. Listen, that's a lot of fly-by-night companies say a lot of different things. They want to get you money. But my friends at R.S. Andrews, I believe they may be able to give you a second opinion on that. And they may be able to tell you how you can breathe some new life into that AC unit and get it back to factory fresh specs. In fact, it may only cost you $99. So check out RS Andrews online at rsandrews.com for a lot more on that. All right, let us go to, I'm going to do some DawgNation.coms here off the top. And so very good. Chadwick Irie says, I like that Tim Tatum was the Golden Shoe winner. So Chadwick shouting out Tim. You'd love to see that. CTC says, not a Saban fan. He will do anything to win. There is something about the way in which he answered the tampering question that I found to be a little bit weird. And maybe I didn't express this as well as it could have been expressed. Maybe I did. I don't know. But this idea of, I don't know nothing about no tampering. I don't know anything about that. Like if you're playing dumb to that degree, then what really is going on here? I did not really like the answer all that much. Also, Matt Rukavina reminding that when it comes to like squabbles back and forth, he is never the one to start them. And that is probably true. That's probably true. Randy Hall said, I gave a classic chortle a little earlier. Like, I really don't think Smart meant anything by what he said. You know, maybe he did, but I don't think that he did. I truly don't. I think he's just kind of having some fun. He's not even talking about he's talking about Greg McElroy in the golf course. He's not talking about, Nick Saban on the football field. But in light of how many excuses that Alabama's been making as of late, the idea that Smart comes out against making excuses when talking about a former Alabama football player, that's a little too juicy not to just dive into a little bit. I think that's the case. Brandon Griffin says, I love watching our young wide receivers block. He says those young guns have already bought into Kirby's system and are opening up big plays with their unselfish blocking. I think that's true. And that's one of the things that George Pickens takes with him to the NFL. He's talked openly about enjoying that part of the game, even though obviously, like any wide receiver, he wants to make big catches. He has also talked about, the way in which he enjoys, being physical like that there as well. And I know there's a couple knocks on Pickens a little bit. Some whispers of draft scouts had, negative evaluation, things like that. Listen, I'm not going to certainly pretend that anybody's perfect. And, Pickens obviously had some blemishes on his UGA career that kind of feel like a little bit of, immaturity maybe. And I understand all of that. And I certainly don't fully discount that. But I'll take that competitive fire that he brings to the table any day of the week. I really will. You can look, an immature person can grow up, but can a guy who doesn't have the fire burning in them find that? I don't know. The people that I've been around in my life would lead you to believe that no, maybe not. So take that for what it's worth. Brian Whitehead says that he thinks that Kirby was making an underhanded jab at all the Bama fans. Listen, if he wants to do that, I got no problem with that. What I'm going to try not to do is put Kirby on the defensive, on this. But I would certainly like to believe that was true, Brian. I certainly would. That's really good. Brian Whitehead also pointing out how pumped up the Philly fans are to have Jordan Davis and Kobe Dean. Yeah, that's been really fun to see. They have been really well received there for sure. Chadwick Irie also enjoyed the contrast there too. Yeah, that's one of those things where, like, when I was putting that together, like the little audio for that, I was like, I was enjoying it, so I was hoping other people would. Sometimes you kind of do things that you enjoy in the hopes other people would, but it's one of those things when you compare it side by side, it sounds pretty good. I kind of like that. So I'm glad you did, Chadwick. Thank you very much for that. Let's get some YouTubes here for a moment. See how folks are doing over there. On YouTube here today, Foster Moss, he says he's seen a guy trying to sell some replica Florida National Championship trophies in the Antique Roadshow. They took him out for trying to sell trash. That's funny, Foster. That's very funny. Frank Patterson says one thing that hasn't been mentioned about Manning, should he come to UGA, there'd be a ton of other elite recruits that would want to come and play with Arch, not that UGA needs help. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I think you always like the idea of, wide receivers wanting to play with the quarterback. I I mean, I think that you do hope that Manning has some real coattails right there, and I think there's reason to believe that he would. Wally Smith says, are you going to predict the upcoming Bulldog season? Yeah, we'll get to that eventually. We'll probably do that early June. We'll kind of get into some official predictions there. That's been the last few years around the spot. We kind of make our official predictions about a lot of things. So we'll go on the record early June about all of that. I'm getting pretty close to being able to do that. Zebulon Owen, thanks for the kind words. Appreciate that. Croaking 123 says, I think that Trayvon Walker's going to be surprisingly successful early. I like that. He says, I also love where our running backs landed. I think that's a good thing about there, too. I especially love the fit for James Cook in Buffalo. I think that could be really fun to see. JC says, I ain't going to lie, I'd love to meet Coach Saban in person. Yeah, to me, there's kind of like two versions of Nick Saban in my mind. There is the one version of him that I clearly have respect for. You couldn't help but not have respect for someone who's been as successful as he has been. And I do believe that the mindset that Saban has cultivated has led to that success. So there's like this aspect of Saban. Like we played the clip the other day of him talking about, the way in which he values like consistent winning over the course of the long haul. That to me is just kind of a good perspective on life. So there's that aspect of Saban that admittedly, I do have respect for. There's also the kind of Saban as arch nemesis to Georgia where I sort of pretend like the respectable part of him doesn't really exist, and I do kind of like using him as a foil because there are a lot of people who think that Saban can do no wrong, and so when you rightly point out areas in which he has been wrong, I think that kind of gets some people kind of on tilt a bit, and so I kind of like that part of it too. It's like there is one thing to respect someone. I clearly, respect Saban. You couldn't help but not. But listen, as a man, I'm not going to treat any other man as if he's infallible. I'm just not, because no one is. So Saban, coach that we respect, you say you'd like to meet him. Clearly, I'd like to, spend time with him myself and kind of take some of his wisdom into my own life. Obviously, I'd like the chance to do that. But as a fun thing, when he has proven himself to be an error, whether it be making excuses after the national championship game, talking about, kind of trading the physicality that once dominated Alabama, kind of defined Alabama with the finesse program they've become. We can kind of point those kinds of things out. That's obviously going to be, the kind of stuff we're going to have a good time doing. By the way, Trayvon Walker's put his deal together. Contracts in the NFL are a little bit different than they used to be for these rookie guys. These things are all pretty well slotted. But Walker gets $37.4 million. Mike Garofalo from the NFL Network reporting that. So it's going to be a $24.4 million signing bonus. And then here's the thing about like first round picks now, and I believe like when you're like I'm not a contract expert in the NFL, but this is one of the things that like the later round picks don't have to have. So it's like it's great to be a first round pick, but if you just miss out on the first round, the one advantage you do get is there is that fifth year team option for the first round picks, and I think you have to pick that up if you're the team prior to the player's fourth year. Most of the time, teams. It's a pretty bad thing if you're not picking that fifth year option up. I mean, the Falcons, of course, have had rookies they haven't picked that up for. But most teams are hopeful that you're keeping a player around for that fifth year. But it does slow down that player's chance to then cash in again. So if you're a second, third round pick, it's one of those things that gives you a chance to, have a quicker chance to make a little bit more money. But listen, from a money standpoint, it does not sound like Trayvon's going to be hurting here. $24.4 million on the signing bonus there on that. So this just coming out via the NFL Network. Let us see what else. DMart42 says, I said, shoot, Lewis Scene's $12 million guaranteed is life-changing in my book. Couldn't fathom that much, let alone 3 times that for Trayvon. Yeah, it's amazing. It's generational wealth. This is the kind of thing that, this makes you a mogul, right? I mean, $12 million. Here's what I don't know, and some of y'all know contract stuff better than me. So, Scene's the number 32 pick. He gets $12 million guaranteed. What does the 33 player get? Number 33 pick get? What does the first pick in the second round get monetarily? Like, how much of a gain does Scene get by being last player taken the first round compared to first player taken the second round? Like I said, I'm just not that into contracts. I don't really know that. Lesko checks in to say, other than Georgia Bama in 2021, has there ever been two conference contenders that faced each other in the national title that same season? He says 2017 was Auburn, Georgia in the SEC, and Bama, UGA for the national title. Yeah, the only other example I can really think of is Alabama and LSU from 2011. They played each other for the national championship there. Bama lost the regular season game, won the national championship rematch. So Bama actually has two examples of a national championship in which it did not win the SEC championship. It's happened twice in the Nick Saban era for Alabama. There was a situation a couple of years ago where Michigan and Ohio State would have almost played again, and they didn't. But Alabama's actually got two instances where it's played another SEC team for a national championship. And it kind of sets up, most people kind of think that Georgia and Alabama will both be back in the playoff again. So you're talking about a committee that wants this to be a national sport. You're talking about the battle that's currently going on over playoff expansion with Greg Sankey kind of drawing his line to say, we don't need expansion. You almost wonder that level of, I don't want to call it hubris, but that level of outspoken confidence in the part of Sankey, does that work against the SEC at some point in time, that if there's a way to kind of put your thumb on the scale and keep it from being Georgia, Alabama for the title for a third time, will the committee look for the opportunity to do that? Especially when there's reason to believe that the country might like to see somebody else in the discussion. I wonder about that. I do. Let us see what else. Scott Boland says, I think the players would rather be an early second than a late first. He says the lack of that fifth-year option might be more lucrative. It is the silver lining to not being a first-round pick, but isn't, like I said, let me see if I can just look this up. But like I said, I'm not enough a contract person to know, $12 million, that's a lot of money. Hold on, yeah. Let me see if I can find this quickly. So it says the first player picked in the second round is going to receive a 4-year contract worth about $9.91 million. So it doesn't carry a fifth-year option. How much of that is guaranteed? And the money won't be fully guaranteed. Yeah. So let me see if I can get this. So I think the issue here is like, hey, your per year salary, which in the NFL a lot of times is kind of a made up figure because of because you can be cut, things like that. How much of this is guaranteed? It's not really saying. Yeah, so basically you have a good salary as long as you are healthy and play on the team. But in the case of Lewis Seen, that $12 million that he's getting, a good portion of that is guaranteed money. That's what those first-round picks get. So I'd say that the lack of a fifth-year option is a good silver lining for a second-round pick, but it's not better than the guaranteed money that a first-round pick gets because you have to play really well over the course of 4 years to even make that next contract even come to fruition. Whereas, if something were to happen to Lewis Seen, heaven forbid, then he's got that money for life, 8-figure money for life right there. That's a pretty good thing. All right, I haven't been to Facebook yet. Oh, let me get over to Facebook. I apologize for that. Let's see how they're doing over there. Apologies for getting up here a little late today. On Facebook, and as I told you before, don't forget we got a couple of fun live broadcasts coming up on Monday with our friends at Palo Window and Door of Georgia, and then the following Monday hanging out at the David Pollack Golf Tournament. That's going to be a really good thing. Matt and Rukavina on the subject of Nick Saban making excuses. So, yeah, folks having a good time with that today. I love to see that. Ken Holcomb says all these guys from last year's team signing big contracts should bring us some large NIL cash for some transfer portal players through donations. No tampering now. That's pretty funny from Ken. I like that. Yeah, maybe they will throw some money back in the old offering plate there. Philip Jordan Wells says that mobile quarterback and a great offense is the Nick Saban kryptonite. That's been the case before, although, what's kind of funny is like last year they got picked apart by Zach Calzada. It's one of those strange things where that game against Texas A&M is going to always be very hard to explain. Let's see what else. Matt Rugavina, going back to what I said a moment ago, he says, I've been saying this for years. You go spread, you go soft. There's always a trade-off. Yeah, there's no such thing as all good with no bad. There's just no such thing as that. That everything you do to benefit you in one way is going to cost you in another way. That's just true with every decision in life. So Alabama, in its pursuit of, as Nick Saban said in the audio clip that I played before, hey, we wanted good playmakers. We wanted good quarterback. We wanted all that kind of stuff. Well, if that's your number one mission as a coach, you're going to suffer in other areas. And the other areas which Alabama has suffered has cost them dearly. Craig Hill says, I did respect Saban until he came up with excuses for losing. We were the better team. Coach needed to take responsibility. I certainly don't think that Saban has behaved in a very dignified manner post-national championship game. Craig, I would agree with you on that. Lucy Bowers-Boykin, thanks for being here today. Chris Collins says, Georgia's going to be burning the boats again. I like the idea of that. Daniel Aldridge says 12-0, off we go. Yeah, I mean, spoiler alert here. I would say that an undefeated regular season is far more likely than not for UJ once again. Randy Hall also on Facebook talking about the classic chortle from this morning. Yeah, I had fun with that. I hope you all did it because I had fun with that. Chad Buchanan also calling for a back-to-back national championship. That's awesome. Sandy Price also coming in here with a good comment. And same thing kind of happens over sometimes these comments get hidden, and I honestly don't know how that happens or why that happens. I don't know if Facebook's flagging some of this kind of stuff. I guess anything's possible. Chris Collins also says that King Kirby's going to win multiple titles at UGA. He's just getting started championship seasons. I like that. Henry Carter there as well. Sandy Price says, just ask Nick Saban where that national championship trophy sitting. He said, she says, that's case closed. Yeah, Sandy, I think you're right on that. I think you're really right on that. Kent Holcomb, also very funny. Jamie Huff says, the Clemson people are making more excuses than the Bama people are. I think that Clemson, in a lot of ways, is one of the most interesting teams for this upcoming season. First of all, because it's very easy to put Georgia and Alabama back in the playoff. It's very easy to put Ohio State in the playoff. Ohio State's a very big favorite in comparison to the rest of the Big Ten. But you got to have four teams for a playoff. Who is that fourth playoff team? And we've had some commenters during this part of the day who've said, well, I think maybe it could be Clemson. But they're going to have to regain some of that magic they used to have at the quarterback spot. And I just don't know how likely that is. Like when you didn't have a Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson level season from a Clemson quarterback last year, all of a sudden you realize, man, this offensive line is not very good. And man, these offensive playmakers, especially with the injury to Will Shipley, these playmakers aren't very good. Defense, fantastic, but boy, there's a lot of holes in that Clemson team. All of a sudden now Brent Venables is not there anymore. I mean, there are going to be a lot of people who do predict Clemson to kind of return to its former glory. And maybe they do. It's certainly a possibility. They're not that far off from where that could take place. But wow. And it's also fair to point out, by the end of the season last year, they were also playing a little bit better than they played at the middle of the season. But seems like last year also kind of identified some areas in which their just overall roster depth just isn't that great for me. So I don't know. I think that Clemson's a pretty intriguing team for this upcoming year because you got to find a fourth playoff team somewhere, whether it be Clemson coming out of the ACC or, some people are going to even say like Tech, So it's like Big 12 between an Oklahoma, the first-year coach, and Texas, the second-year coach, or, Clemson coming out of the ACC, the possibility that Miami might emerge there. I think all that's really interesting. Jay Bryan looking forward to the Georgia wide receivers. Yeah, I'm actually a little higher in the receiver situation. We're going to talk probably more about the Georgia offense tomorrow. I think that there's a good bit of explosive potential there. I really do. I think this is a pretty good wide receiver room right now. I do. So I think you may be right about that, in other words. Kent Holcomb says it's starting to show that none of the great recruits want to go to an ACC school, including Clemson. He says with the P there, and that Kent says, they're not recruiting like they once did for sure, especially line of scrimmage stuff. Rambo says, talking about making excuses, was it ever Steve Spurrier's fault that Florida or South Carolina lost a game? No, that's kind of interesting. Randy Hall says we'll be doing a high school game with Buford this year. I'd say there's a really good chance we do. Justice Haynes now there with the Wolves, seeing them on TV. I'd say there's a very strong likelihood of that. Don't forget, we're going to be on Peachtree TV next Thursday. That's May 19th for a really fun jamboree involving North Gwinnett and Archer and Northside, Warner Robins, and Marietta. 4 really good programs kind of showcasing themselves there during the spring. That's actually going to be really fun. I'm looking forward to that on TV next week. That's going to be on Thursday. All right, anything else on YouTube before we go? So a lot of good conversation ongoing here. DMart42 says South Carolina might be competitive for third in the division this year. Yeah, I think they're pretty good. I think they're going to be tough to beat. I think that last year one of the big wins for Tennessee was the win against South Carolina. I think that South Carolina trying to return that favor this year could be pretty interesting. I'd probably put Kentucky ahead of them. My number 2 team in the division might actually be Kentucky. I think that Tennessee makes a push for that, but as you said, South Carolina is potentially a third team in the division. And I think what's also interesting about that is that third in the SEC East this year is probably a lot better than it has been in the past, too. So I think that's pretty interesting and worth thinking about there, too. So good comments today as a part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Also, let me tell you this. Check out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC.com. Braves got a much-needed win last night, walking it off against the Boston Red Sox. So that's always a really good thing. And as far as what else you can read about in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution here today, obviously the Braves off right now, getting ready for Philadelphia coming in this weekend. And schedule release night coming up for the NFL. So there's all kinds of schedule leaks right now. Who knows if they're real? Some of them I think probably are real, but who knows how real they are. But you can read more about that. Also, I mentioned just briefly that the ACC spring meetings have been taking place here this week. And so if you want to read more about that, Atlanta Journal-Constitution got a good look at the ACC spring meetings. Jim Phillips, the new league commissioner, talking about the idea that football, this is something that Gene Smith has also talked about and others. That's the Ohio State athletic director, eventually moving away from the NCAA, kind of a new governance form for college football. The ACC commissioner's talking about that. Also, 15 big things to do around the Atlanta area this weekend. Always fun to read that online at AJC.com there as well, so make sure you check that out. And our friends at R.S. Andrews, making this show possible. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. If your water heater goes out, and if you're like me, you're taking a bunch of showers this time of year, I'm out, trying to play a little golf, coach some baseball, go to the swimming pool, that's shower in the morning, get ready for work, and you shower in the evening to kind of wash off whatever you've been doing during the evening. And so good, well-functioning water heater, very important thing. So if yours goes out, you want it replaced as quickly as you can. In many cases, R.S. Andrews can replace it for you the same day. So just make sure you check them out online at rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. We'll see you tomorrow for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down after the show and DawgNation Daily presented by Merriweather and Tharp. Before that, 9:45 DawgNation.com and the DawgNation app, 10 a.m. on video everywhere else. We'll look forward to speaking to you then, everybody.